It started the way most of my terrible decisions start, with boredom and a VPN that promised anonymity I was foolish enough to believe in. I had been scrolling through forums that existed in the spaces between the regular internet, places where people traded secrets like currency and asked questions that would make normal people lock their doors and pray. Someone had posted about an app called Watch Me, describing it as the most disturbing thing they had ever encountered, a program that allegedly tapped into every camera connected to the internet and let you view random streams from around the world. The comments underneath were a mixture of disbelief and fascination, but one reply caught my attention more than the others. A user with no post history and a scrambled username had written only 4 words that made my stomach turn with equal parts curiosity and dread. It watches you back. I should have closed my laptop right then, should have cleared my browser history and gone to bed like a reasonable person. But curiosity has always been the knife I use to cut my own throat. I downloaded the link, ignored the warnings my antivirus screamed at me, and watched as a simple black interface loaded onto my screen with nothing but a pulsing red button that said, "Enter stream." The first few streams were exactly what I expected from something harvested from the dark corners of the internet. Mundane footage that felt voyeuristic in the most boring way possible. I watched an empty office building in what looked like Eastern Europe, fluorescent lights flickering over rows of abandoned desks. Then a living room somewhere tropical, a ceiling fan spinning lazily, while a television played a show in a language I did not recognize. A parking garage with cars that never moved, a restaurant kitchen where cooks worked unaware they were being observed, a bedroom where someone slept so still I had to watch for minutes just to confirm they were breathing. Each stream lasted exactly 60 seconds before the app automatically shuffled to the next feed, and I found myself clicking through them like channels on a television that broadcast only the mundane horrors of surveillance culture. It was unsettling in an abstract way, knowing that any of these cameras could be pointed at me without my knowledge, but that discomfort was distant enough that I kept watching with the detached fascination of someone who still believed they were safe behind their own screen. The shift happened so gradually that I almost missed it, the streams getting darker in tone as the night wore on outside my window. I saw a woman crying in a bathroom, mascara running down her face as she gripped the sink like it was the only thing keeping her standing. A man in a dimly lit basement, pacing back and forth in front of something I could not quite see, his movements jerky and agitated in a way that made my pulse quicken. A child's bedroom with the closet door slightly ajar, darkness pooling behind it like something breathing and waiting. Each stream felt more invasive than the last, more intimate in ways that made me feel complicit in something I could not name. I told myself I should stop, that whatever algorithm feeding me these images was learning something about me. I did not want it to know, but my finger kept clicking that red button with a compulsion that felt less like choice and more like being pulled toward something inevitable. When the next stream loaded and I saw the familiar blue walls of my own bedroom reflected back at me, my first thought was not fear but confusion, because I did not own a camera that pointed at my bed from that angle. My laptop was positioned on my desk across the room, its built-in camera facing the window behind me, but the feed I was watching showed my bed from the opposite corner, from a vantage point near the ceiling above my closet door. I could see myself in the frame, frozen at my desk with my back turned, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my silhouette in a way that looked almost staged. For a long moment I did not move, convinced that I was looking at some kind of trick, a generated image or a delayed recording that the app had somehow created from data scraped from my own device. But then I watched myself on the screen slowly raise my right hand to scratch my neck, and I felt my own fingers brush against my skin in perfect synchronization with the movement I was watching. The realization that this was happening in real time hit me like a physical blow, and I spun around in my chair so fast that I nearly fell, my eyes scanning the dark corner above my closet for any sign of a camera I had somehow missed. There was nothing there but shadow and the same blank wall I had looked at 1,000 times before, but when I turned back to my screen, I could see my own terrified face now visible in the frame, staring directly at where the camera should have been. I want to tell you that I acted rationally in that moment, that I calmly assessed the situation and took logical steps to protect myself. But the truth is that panic seized control of my body with a grip that left no room for reason. I slammed my laptop shut as if that could sever whatever connection had been made, my breathing coming in short gasps that echoed too loudly in the sudden silence of my room. My eyes kept darting to that corner above the closet, searching for any glint of glass or LED light that might betray the presence of a hidden device, but the darkness there seemed deeper than before, more solid in a way that made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the ceiling and walls with hands that trembled so badly the light jerked and stuttered. There was nothing, no camera, no hole in the wall, no explanation for what I had just witnessed, and somehow that absence of evidence was more terrifying than finding some physical device would have been. At least a camera could be removed and destroyed, but whatever was watching me existed in a space I could not access or understand. The logical part of my brain, the part that had been screaming at me to stop since I first downloaded that cursed app, finally managed to make itself heard over the roar of my panic. I needed to document what was happening, needed proof that I was not losing my mind, so I forced myself to open my laptop again with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. The app was still running, but the stream had shuffled to a different feed, showing what looked like a hospital corridor somewhere far away and entirely irrelevant to my terror. I clicked the red button again and again, cycling through streams of strangers in their private moments, searching for my room like someone desperately flipping through channels to find a show they had just lost. But the more I clicked, the more the streams seemed to change in character, showing me places that felt somehow familiar in ways I could not place. A stairwell that looked like the one in my apartment building, a parking lot that might have been the one outside my window, a hallway that could have been the one leading to my front door. Each stream lasted only seconds before shuffling away, but the cumulative effect was unmistakable, and I realized with growing horror that the app was showing me a path, a route that led directly to where I was sitting. I do not remember making the conscious decision to check my front door, but suddenly I was moving through my apartment with my phone clutched like a weapon, the flashlight beam carving through darkness that felt thicker and more hostile than it had any right to be. My hand was on the deadbolt before I even registered that I had crossed the room, and the metal was cool against my palm as I confirmed that the lock was engaged and the chain was in place. But confirmation brought no comfort, because I could feel something on the other side of that door, a presence that registered not as sound or sight, but as pure animal instinct screaming through every nerve in my body. I held my breath and pressed my ear against the wood, listening for footsteps or breathing, or any evidence that would justify the terror coursing through my veins. For a long moment there was nothing but the distant hum of the building's HVAC system and the rush of blood in my ears, and I had almost convinced myself that I was being paranoid when I heard it. A soft beep from the other side of the door, the same electronic chirp my phone made when it connected to a new network. Bendroid, this, een moment, the nothing was in I'd water did the same of and the rush of blood in my ears, and I had almost convinced myself beep from the other side and by the and kanon and every in Weiskensendes Eisbeneste. When I heard I'd work guy. The next few minutes exist in my memory as a series of disconnected images and sensations, the way trauma fragments time into pieces that refuse to fit back together in a coherent sequence. I remember backing away from the door so quickly that I tripped over my own feet and fell hard against the hallway wall. I remember the sound of my own voice making noises that were not quite words, half-formed pleas and profanity that died in my throat before they could become anything meaningful. I remember crawling back to my bedroom and grabbing my laptop, my eyes locked on the screen as I tried to find that stream of my own room again, desperate to see if there was something in that impossible angle that might reveal who or what was hunting me. The app kept shuffling through feeds that felt like taunts now, glimpses of other rooms and other victims that I could not help, until finally it landed on a stream that stopped my heart and the breath in my lungs simultaneously. It was not my room this time, but my hallway, filmed from an angle that looked down at my bedroom door from somewhere near the ceiling, and in the frame I could see a figure standing motionless in the shadows, its face turned toward the camera with features I could not quite resolve into anything human. I did what anyone would do when confronted with evidence that something impossible was standing just feet away from where they hid, behind a flimsy wooden door, which is to say I did absolutely nothing useful except stare at the screen in paralyzed terror. The figure in the stream did not move, did not breathe that I could see, just stood there in my hallway like a monument to every nightmare I had ever had about being watched by something I could not see. I wanted to believe it was a glitch, a composite image the app had generated to frighten me into engagement, but the longer I looked, the more details emerged from the shadows that made denial impossible. The figure was wearing clothes, dark fabric that absorbed what little light reached that corner of the hallway, and its hands hung at its sides in a posture that suggested patient waiting rather than aggression. It knew I was watching, I realized, and that knowledge was somehow worse than if it had been trying to hide its presence. This thing wanted me to see it, wanted me to understand that the barrier between observer and observed had been shattered completely. A laundromat in the early hours of morning, a highway overpass with cars streaming beneath it, a factory floor where machines operated with no human workers in sight. Each stream felt like mockery now, the app demonstrating that it controlled what I could see and when, that I had surrendered my agency the moment I downloaded that red button onto my screen. When my bedroom finally appeared again, filmed from that same impossible angle above my closet, I was almost relieved until I noticed what had changed. The desk where I had been sitting was now empty, my laptop closed and dark, and I realized with creeping horror that I was looking at a feed of my room from the future, a preview of what would happen when I was no longer there to see it. The sound of my doorknob turning slowly was so quiet that I might have missed it if my senses had not been sharpened to supernatural acuity by pure adrenaline. The knob rotated a few degrees, stopped when the lock engaged, then rotated back to its original position with the patience of something that had all the time in the world. I watched my laptop screen as if it might show me what was happening on the other side of my bedroom door, but the feed had shuffled again to show a cemetery somewhere covered in snow, headstones casting long shadows in the pale moonlight. The absurdity of my situation struck me even through the fear that I was relying on an app that had already demonstrated malevolent intent to provide me with information that might save my life. I closed my laptop and set it aside, realizing that whatever was about to happen would happen regardless of whether I was watching, and that the app had served its purpose by making me too afraid to move, too fascinated by the screen, to take any meaningful action to protect myself. I had been domesticated by my own curiosity, turned into the perfect victim by my inability to stop watching. What I did next was either the bravest or stupidest thing I have ever done, and I still cannot decide which description fits better, even now that I have survived to tell this story. I stood up from my bed, walked to my bedroom door, and opened it before my rational mind could talk me out of it. The hallway beyond was empty, just shadows and the familiar shapes of my apartment furniture, rendered strange by fear and darkness. No figure stood waiting in the corner where the stream had shown it. No monster lurked behind my couch or crouched in the kitchen doorway. I walked through every room of my apartment with the lights blazing, checking closets and corners, and even the space behind the shower curtain, and found nothing that should not have been there. By the time I returned to my bedroom, my heart rate had almost returned to normal, and I was starting to construct explanations that would let me dismiss what I had experienced as a sophisticated prank or a stress-induced hallucination. It was disturbing technology, certainly, but not supernatural, not proof that something was hunting me through the digital infrastructure of my own home. I almost convinced myself that the nightmare was over, that I could delete the app and pretend this night had never happened, until I looked at the corner above my closet and noticed for the first time a tiny hole in the drywall that I was absolutely certain had not been there before. It was small, no larger than a pencil eraser, positioned at exactly the right angle to capture a view of my entire bedroom, including my bed and desk. I grabbed a chair and stood on it, pressing my eye close to the hole, and saw nothing but darkness on the other side, darkness that seemed to move and breathe with a rhythm that matched my own terrified heartbeat. When I pulled back, something pushed through the hole from the other side, something thin and jointed that unfolded into the light of my bedroom like a finger testing the air. I fell from the chair and hit the ground hard, but I was already scrambling for the door before the pain could register, already running through my apartment and out into the hallway, and down the stairs to the lobby where the night security guard looked up from his phone with mild concern. I told him someone had broken into my apartment, a lie that was easier than the truth, and he called the police while I sat in the bright safety of the lobby and tried to stop my hands from shaking. They found nothing, of course, no hole in my wall, and no evidence of intrusion, and no explanation for why a grown adult would flee their own apartment in the middle of the night, screaming about fingers coming through the ceiling. I could tell they thought I was having some kind of breakdown, and maybe they were right. Maybe the whole thing was just my brain short-circuiting from too much time spent in the dark corners of the internet. But I know what I saw on that screen, and I know what I felt when that thing touched the air of my bedroom, and the app is gone from my laptop now, deleted and scrubbed and buried under layers of security software that probably provide no real protection against whatever I invited into my life. Sometimes at night, in the hotel rooms I have been staying in since I fled my home, I think I hear a soft electronic chirp from somewhere I cannot locate. And sometimes when I look at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone, I could swear the angle is slightly wrong, as if the camera is showing me not what is in front of it, but what is watching from somewhere just behind my shoulder, waiting with infinite patience for me to look away from the screen long enough to make my last mistake.